Well, welcome to another Discover Headless Tech interview from headlesscreator.com. I'm Marcelo Lewin, the Headless Creator. As always, get a hold of me right there, Marcelo at headlesscreator.com. Send me any questions you have. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Today's conversation is all about something that is very close to my heart, structured content for content authors. And I'm a very big fan of this guest, Carrie Hane. She is the co-author of the Bible of structured content, designing connected content. She's also the head of content strategy relations at Sanity.io. So we're going to get to her in just a minute. But before we get to the interview, you know how this works. I'm going to tell you real quick about headlesscreator.com and why you need to get your free account. Most of you already know. Get your free account. Why? First of all, it's free. Second, you're going to get access to all the courses. You're going to have access to all the podcast interviews, the Content Modeling Weekly. For those of you here for content modeling, go get that course. It's 100% free. I keep adding lessons. I try to keep it weekly, but you know how life is. So I keep adding lessons there, and you'll learn all sorts of real-world hands-on with content models on Miraboard that you can download and play with as well. You'll have access to Discover Headless Tech, a bunch of Headless CMS courses, and bootcamp courses as well. So get your free account. It won't hurt you. It won't cost you anything except, a couple of typing strokes there, and that's about it. So I think you'll enjoy it a lot. All right, with that said, we're going to get started on the interview here. And just a quick reminder that you want to, if you have any questions, put them in the comments, and I'll ask Carrie, and we'll go from there. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and bring in Carrie. Carrie, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure having you here, having read your book and a lot of cool stuff. And content modeling is very close to my heart. I love that. I call myself a content modeling geek, so I can't wait to start talking about all that stuff with you. But before we get started, how did you get into like content and strategy and all that stuff?
Yeah, accidentally. I think like so many people who have started back in the stone ages of the web, I had to work on a website in the late 90s for my organization and said, oh, this is pretty cool. I think I can do this. And so just really, I got to grow up with the web, I think, and just constantly specialized as I went, starting with, being basically a webmaster and hand coding a website in Notepad. And then always interested in the strategy and the content side. I think those were just naturally came to me from coming from a liberal arts background, and yeah, got lots of opportunities along the way, and got to be in the right places at the right times to get to where I am today.
It seems like we both got started at the same time. I got started in the web in the late 90s as well, basically at the beginning of the web. I ended up taking more of the developer route as opposed to the strategy. Now I'm more obviously on the strategy side. But like, how did you wrote the book, Designing Connect, or you co-authored the book, right? Designer Connecting Content. How did you even think about that? I mean, because that was way ahead of its time, about intelligent structured content, right? And we're going to get into the details of what that is for people that aren't familiar. But how did you even think about that? Like, what was it an evolution to get to that point, or did you just wake up one day and go like, aha?
No, nothing ever happened like
That would have been a
that.
better story, though.
So first of all, I don't think it was ahead of its time. I think it was right on time, but uh, but other things were also happening at the same time that I think caught on more. But I'm glad it never fell off the radar. No, but it happened, I think, following Mike and I working together on the IA Summit in 2015 and kind of going through this process. He brought the modeling work from his time at the BBC, and I brought the implementation work of structuring content in a CMS, primarily Drupal at that time, and said, if we put these things together, no one else is talking about this in this way. And it actually started with, we did a workshop at some UX and content conferences in 2015, 2016, when the idea of a book came to us, and we ran with it, and we're happy to work with the folks at Pearson to publish it. But yeah, it was we thought we were bringing a holistic and unique and kind of end-to-end framework around developing not just websites but any channel. Because, and it's also interesting when I think about when we first started talking about this publicly, we, is late 2015, 2016, and we're like, we don't know what's going to happen next, but we're sure that this is going to be the answer. And by the time the book was published, everybody was talking about AI, and personalization and all the things that structured content can enable. But we wanted to get back to more of the heart and the reason why the web was created, and the whole idea of it. So anytime I can bring things back to, that's why the web was created, not to have a bunch of siloed websites, but to have all of this information connected. Um, you know, I think it's great.
How do you feel about where we are today with structured content?
I wish we were in a different place.
What do you mean by that?
It's I think we should be in a different place. I think too often people hear structured content and they either think it's too hard and they can't do it, or they think that they're already doing it, because they've formatted their pages in a way where you're using headings, and so you have that outline, which is one kind of structure but not the structure we're talking about.
Right.
um, i know we'll reach a tipping point at some point, when truly structured content is the default, but we're a ways off from there, because we're still too focused on web pages,
Right.
and social posts and voice whatever, and everything is narrow and siloed. But to reach the true potential, we have to be more expansive and think not of today, but of what we could possibly need to do tomorrow.
I'm glad you said that because you're right. I mean, people are really still with omni-channel. They really mean web page, 90% of the time,
Or
right?
multiple web pages.
Multiple web pages, or maybe let's add a second channel, which is the mobile app. But then beyond that, that's about it, right? And I'm glad you said that because I personally, I'm the same way. I feel like you, where but I think part of it is also the headless CMS industry in general. The entire industry needs to do a better job at focusing on content authors, and that's the whole point of today's conversation, is focusing on content authors and retraining them and their way of thinking, right? I mean, what's your take on that? Because I feel like authors are still in a headless CMS. They're still trying to enter content like they are in a legacy CMS. They still want to format all their text. They still want to move their text right 2 pixels, from the left and bring it down, and they want to control all of that. What can we do as an industry to change that? Because we have to change that, and it's not just giving them the technology, but it's also helping them understand it.
Yeah, and it's exactly that. It's extending empathy to our colleagues, just like we talk about extending them to our users. And I've always thought about the authors or content creators or editors, whatever we want to call them, the people who use the CMS to create and manage content. They are users, but people forget that.
Right.
Um, I know, since going to work for a content product, It's interesting how we focus on the developer experience, and of course that's super important, but people aren't necessarily putting themselves in the shoes of the person who
Of the
has to
author.
use it.
Yep.
I feel like developers are important because they're the people who build it, but they have to be collaborating with the people who are using it. But I also don't think it's a developer's job to train content authors. Um, that's not. I mean, some of them can, but yeah, it's not just giving them a manual and saying go. It's starting with, well, what do you need? What are your workflows? Starting with where people who are creating the content are, and figuring out how that can be more efficient. How can we build a system, a technology system that supports the business rules and the workflows? So that's one step, is just going all the way back to the beginning and involve those people from the start as users. And then it's hard. It's because, like, well, then who does the actual training of them? It could be a content strategist who is at a higher level in the company that oversees content across the enterprise or the organization, and not just marketing. Um, it could be a product manager, who gets it. It's whoever gets it, and who makes this all happen, and sits down and says, okay, yes, you in media relations, you're primarily going to be publishing press releases and statements from our executives. Um, but where else are those appearing other than our website? So it's not just this one thing, because that's how it used to be. And we've continued a lot of legacy work that isn't needed. So it also needs to go to PR Wire. It also needs to go on our social channels. It also needs to go on our app. It also journalists need to find it. Like how do we?
Newsletter.
What are all the components of that press release
Right.
that make it possible to go out everywhere, and all the right information get to the right people in the right places, which is literally the definition of content strategy. um, and and then chunking it up so that it's possible for them to do it. um, I've done that primarily in Word and Google Docs, which um, works, because that's where those people are used to working. um, I know one of the goals we have at Sanity is to move people into the CMS sooner, but that's only possible if you set up workflows and
Yeah.
a system that allows people to work the way they want to work, and not the way they're forced to work. Um, and that sometimes that depends on the product. Sometimes it depends on how the product's built. So we need to get better about that and just start thinking about why we're creating the system in the first place, and then finding the ways to support that. Sometimes we need to bring in consultants and trainers. Um, there's a lot of people who have been doing this and can help coaching and training people, just to get them started. You don't need to have them forever. I most consultants I know, and when I was a consultant, I wanted to work myself out of a job, get you going, teach you how to fish, kind of, and then see you flourish.
But I think you're right. I think there's got to be an owner in the organization, right? That oversees not so much the content strategy, but the content architecture, the content model, to make sure that single source of truth, scalability, everything is respected. So that way it truly becomes connected and can be reused in different channels. So I know we're throwing a lot of terms. Some people may be new to this, especially authors. So let's start with, like, what is the big difference? Explain the big difference between structured content and an HTML page, basically.
Well, HTML is not unstructured when done properly. Um, so structured content is breaking down a content into the smallest reasonable pieces, um, so that it can be understood by computers and humans alike, in wherever it ends up. Um, and that has to be done in the back end, the background in your content management system or database. So if we think about it as content, as data. In fact, Google and SEO professionals talk about it as structured data. It's really the same thing. There is a data component on top of the content, but just thinking about the purpose and the 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 architecture of and the patterns of the content, outside of how it appears in any given interface.
Right, right. So you're truly separating, and when I said HTML, I meant separating design from the content itself, right? Not mixing those two up. Um, what are some? I mean, we kind of touched upon challenges, but what are some challenges you see with structured content versus just, hey, I can create the page and it publish it and we're done.
Um, I think it's understanding why. What's in it for the author? Sometimes they don't. Sometimes there's not a whole lot for that one person who's creating it.
Right.
So, we have to share what's in it for them. One of the things that I've often said, in working with people new to this who have to start creating content in a different way is, do you want your content found? Um, then let's do it this way so that it's easy for search engines to find it, both internal on a given platform and globally in Google or wherever people are searching. Um, do you want it to update it easily? What if you have to change somebody's name? Do you want to update it in 14 places or one? So kind of showing them the benefits of how much faster and easier they'll be able to publish and update content as they go is one of the really big things. And then coaching them through it, like not just giving them things. I hear that too often, just in so many ways. Well, I gave so and so the wireframes, or I gave them the copy